symbolic, because then it also showed some symbolism, you know, with what it brings. Check on that as well. Look, I don't know whether you can get the picture. Kenya Airways had just posted a profit for the first time. Not for the first time, but after so many years of loss making. There was a need for government to posture, first of all, Kenya Airways, to regional, activities and regional convergence like the one that we had. So I agree with you that just as, in addition to the press team around the president and the handlers of the president, it was so deliberate. One, to have the Kenyanese being portrayed yesterday or any other way to these African, China-African, forum. Because one, we are going to negotiate on trade and investment. That requires us to portray the vessels of those trades that we have. And Kenya Airways was in handy because this is a flight. And as it's beautiful as it is, because this is China, Africa. Then you saw Kenya Airways always like, this is the pride of Africa. Everything just was a feat. But here we've arrived as a pride of Africa, and here we are portraying ourselves as a Kenyan and as African. So there's a symbolism that was portrayed yesterday, a symbolism again with the candidature of Raila. And so I was very deliberate on the video yesterday, because the international media zoomed in, Raila as he was ascending. Descending from the plane. After the president, then the focus was on him. Watching around yesterday, the African news, who, the South African SABC was covering it again live. It was so much interesting to see why the focus was on the Kenyan delegation yesterday. For those who cared to watch yesterday what was going on. For the last 3 days in this particular forum, we have seen, very focused on key potential African leaders. The South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and then of course the Malian president, who also was on a focus yesterday, and a number of leaders. But this yesterday, I think it was so much because it hyped the international news as it is. Because I think of the candidature as Wakili has talked about. But again, what then is the objective? Well, there is always about bilateralism when it comes to these particular, forums, Victor. Trade and investment. We are going to talk about geopolitical, issues. We are going to talk about the positioning in Africa as it is. But then, what is the underlying, focus on this? So the Kenyan delegation is very deliberate. Here we have 53 African heads of state available. We've had 3 days ago being threatened about Djibouti candidature, about how he's summed up the 30 heads of state through the Islamic, cooperation that, that is involved. Here we are, the East African heads of state had gathered in Nairobi, and the issue was, are we still worried about the candidature of Djibouti? So this was a signature authority and a stamping feat yesterday that the Kenyan delegation has arrived for charm offensive, but of course of shuttle diplomacy to make sure that the candidature of Right Honorable Raila Odinga is well secured.
I want to connect with what Wakili said. That was a very good opportunity because they had a ready crowd.
Yes.
I mean, Raila Odinga was going there. Perhaps he was not invited, but you have 53 heads of state who are also going to be part and parcel of that voting bloc to sell your agenda to them. But look at it this way. If you have all the East Africa heads of state gathering together and you say, Tanzania, I want you to get me only 5 people, Rwanda, give me 7 people, Kenya, give me as many as you can, and then you have got the Islamic states who also have their own candidates. And that big bloc is a bit of some threat to the Kenyan candidate. Allow me to ask you this way. What do you think Africa or East Africa will have to do? Some kind of magic, Wakila, as we take a break. What kind of magic do you think East Africa can do, and all these heads of state, together with their influence, to slice through the Islamic, bloc that is threatening the candidacy of Raila Odinga?
Well, the Islamic bloc is a threat on account of the fact that it has the emotional attachment to the candidature. But I can tell you this, even that, the interests within that community are very varied. Remember, it's not religion that feeds you, it's the economics of the state and the region. So besides the emotions laced with religion, fact remains that your people have to feed from the economics of the day, of the country, of the region, and the environment as prevail to the economics of the time. Suffice it to say, therefore, economics come first in such an environment, in the economic interest, before the religious interest. Even if the religious interest will be rife, it will only be more about a political situational moment at that time, as opposed to the largesse of the economics, because the economics of the time are both present and futuristic, because you plan for economics, you don't plan for religion, expansion of religion, and this is not a common issue as will prevail at that time. So yes, religion will play a hand in it. But look at the trade relationship between, for instance, Somalia and Kenya. Look at the trade relationships between Kenya. Look at Djibouti and its trade relationships vis-a-vis Djibouti and other countries, and Kenya and other countries, in terms of trade relationships, human rights deployment, and the stature of Kenya on account of its regional influence and African influence and world political forum in the body politic of the world vis-a-vis Djibouti. The Kenyans standing and outstanding dominant position in relation to, the world and other countries, especially the big nations, economic nations in the world, vis-a-vis Djibouti, you will then think that Djibouti has no outstanding position that will probably be competitive against Kenya. Okay. However, this is an international political forum where it's about democracy and it's about the more than put you into that position. So it's a question of bias. You need to bias yourself so that the more the bias, the more the votes, and therefore the win. And that forum, therefore, depicts what will be the fissure that biases others more than yours. And I've said the fissure here will be both religion, and for Djibouti it will be religion, and for Kenya it will be the economics.
Just a quick break, then we come back. Because I really want to take a look, because the campaign is quite hyped as we speak. It's been hyped, and now Uhuru's name, former President Uhuru's name, has also been roped into this, his role and all that. Let's take a break. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us. Have a couple of months to go, but it's a serious campaign that begins actually it's a continuing process. But my question to you, gentlemen, we all know what happened. President William Ruto was in Nyanza last week for a couple of days, and this is what happened. When Kimani Ichung'wah said that he'll not accept, or they'll not sit back and see some people, wanaweka mitego, loosely translated, having traps across Mount Kenya or anywhere across the country to trap Raila Odinga. That did not go well with Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, who on Sunday replied that there are some things you don't say, openly in some forum. But then my question to you, so we have got Raila Odinga here, and we have got 2027 general election. Two questions. What impact will Raila Odinga's win have on 2027 election, or what impact will Raila Odinga's loss have on 2027 general election? Daniel.
Well, I think it's a very complicated political matrix to think about, even just insinuating thinking about it. Well, you could have seen the effects. You could have seen the tantrums that were there when the president was in Nyanza tour. And it's quite interesting to know that he toured Kisumu twice. All right? So that is quite interesting to note how this was really a political, very heavy tour that was ahead of him, and very well planned. But I think, just like you've mentioned, the Mount Kenya politics came to fore in Nyanza tour. And I think we say nothing is deliberate in politics. I mean, nothing is not deliberate. Everything is well planned to cultivate, an outcome that is expected. I was really thinking that Rick J was going to avoid the Nyanza tour. But I think he was simply enjoying his tour at the head of it, talking to people, affirming his political, likeness with the people of Nyanza, accounting historical perspectives of, Mau Mau movement, especially on the hills of Mageta. You could understand. Yeah, really, I was really surprised that, that particular history that Nyanza has had with Central as well. And that was expected. But it's quite also, on the flip side, you could actually ask yourself how would, the president inviting the deputy to grace a political podium, but, to speak in unity and in unison with the president's political agenda of national unity. On the other side, the same delegation had got Kimani Ichung'wah,
yes,
who was not speaking for himself, was equally speaking, for I don't know for who, but also contradicting his political stance towards what the deputy president is speaking in this particular political podium. So you could see a varied political opinion on the perspective of where Mount Kenya is with regards to this particular, broad-based government. So the question you've asked then, the absence of Raila Odinga in this tour, deliberate again, by the fact that we've talked about the AU, we wouldn't want to poster Raila as still active on the Kenyan political, terrain, while at the same time, the Kenyan delegation and the international, delegation is having him as the candidate, the East African candidate. And like you, Wakili have said, the AU Constitutive Act do not allow, the position of the AU chair to be active in local politics. And that is why you've seen Musa Faki, who is the current and the outgoing AU chair. He's very, apolitical on matters that are happening in Chad. He's in his own country. As much as he would wanted to. Remember, Chad had its own share, of political turmoil. And the military issues around Central Africa and Chad in itself. But he abstained for it. He could as well make a decision, but he abstained for it by the virtue that he is currently the chair of the AU Commission. So this is where we are seeing that one, asking the question as to where is, the political outcome. Raila wins the AU, chair position. I think he takes a backseat, but he will still pull strings into the Kenyan political affair. Being a politician, he remains a politician because he said, I think he's on record saying that Addis Ababa is not far from here. Just 2 hours away. And just 2 hours, just 2 hours flight from here. And by the fact that he will be the AU chair, in either way, he loses, he gains. The Kenyan politics is still at the heart of Raila. In either way, he will guide through his troops, because remember, he is not resigned and is not given as a party leader of ODM. I think this is one thing that people have not really, been keen on. While Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, when he was the Prime Cabinet Secretary, he gave the instrument of power of ANC party to Timami, who is the governor of Lamu, to spearhead the issues of ANC party. We've had different political leaders, once they are invited upon to take, public service or international duty, has relinquished their position, because that is what you are legally required to do. But look, we still have the party leader of ODM intact, in preparation that win or lose. I am still the party leader.
There's still a soft landing somewhere.
We only have a reconstitution of the, the chairpersons and the deputy chairpersons and the secretariat within the ODM, but not the party leader. I think that should show you, something that would come when he loses. And I think it's unconditional. He gains the AU, he remains apolitical. He loses, he remains politically active, because he said this is not a very far distance from where Kenya is.
Let me get it from Wakili.
Well, political dominance basically would mean the ability of a party or a person to subdue the opposition. in a context. So the political dominance of Raila Odinga has been such as that he has his own political base and a clientele base that affiliates to him in whatever status as will be. So there is then the politics, the active politics, I will speak, and the passive sleeping cell of politics that will be gained, that can be activated as a tool of trade, a political tool of trade anytime. Yeah. That the need to activate it would arise. So I would speak to this, that Raila Odinga remains a Kenyan politician. He remains, I don't think there'll spring out a politician that can outbid the political clientele base of Raila Odinga, such as then to subdue him as to be the dominant political personality, such as that to go to Kisumu and you can subdue Raila Odinga on that, or the areas where he has his own political base and dominance. Therefore, Raila Odinga can have his political base as a political sleeping cell that can be activated any minute. Raila Odinga at Kondele, while as an immediate resigned AU chairman,
what did you say? As an immediate?
Yes. Assuming Raila Odinga resigns as AU chairman at some point, if he gets
fast forward to 2027.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And he appears in Kondele, the reception will be electric. Definitely. Or Kibera, the reception is going to be electric. So you don't remove that from him. Number two, he is been proposed as the candidate for AU on account of the political activities and his political dominance in the country. In fact, it would be right to say that it is an attempt to eliminate his candidature for purpose of competitive politics in 2027 by sponsoring him to that position. So it is a gain to would be political competitors by eliminating his candidature and elevating him into a higher position as will be in the looks. Now, Raila Odinga is a politician that you can't read him. It's impossible to read him of his intentions. So the suspicion will be he is in fact profiling himself higher for purposes of 2027 or some other day. But number two is probably he has done enough and therefore he can take a rest, and to move to that position is one way of moving from politics. Now mark his words, he has never said he's quitting politics. He has said he's taking a back seat.
Exactly.
Taking a back seat is moving from the front to the back while you're in the same environment. Taking a back seat, therefore, like in a class or in a forum or a gathering, will be you move from the front or will be a frontal position to the back position. It is not quitting, so it's not leaving the room. So he remains in the room of politics as he watches from behind. Yeah. So that when he walks to the front, then he walks to the podium and begins to speak and activate the political environment. So the political environment that has made Raila Odinga the dominant personality is not changing whatsoever. In fact, he's solidifying his personality as an international political personality. Now, that is dual. In that if he succeeds, if he succeeds as the AU chair, then probably there will be thought out pattern of 2027 will work out that he is not in the seat.
That was my next question.
Yes.
Right.
However, if he loses, his political base remains the same for two things. One, he said he's not quitting. Number two, he has access to his political base. And number three, and most importantly, is the tool of trade he has used, which is political base, and ODM as a political party is still intact. In fact, he has told them, those that wanted to take his position, that you can't replace an old man when he's still alive in the home. So he's still alive. He's not gone anywhere. You can only replace your father as the leader of the home if he's dead and you've buried him and you're sure he's in the ground. If he's not, then he remains to be the father. You can't remove him. So in ODM, he remains calling the shots. And by the way, Wandai, Oparanya, Joho, and all that who moved to government did not move the government on their own. They moved the government because Raila Odinga negotiated space for them to join government. And therefore, those are in government at the behest and serve at the behest of Raila Odinga and not necessarily William Ruto. In fact, again, if Raila Odinga wants them removed, they will be removed and replaced.
Okay. There's this trap Ishungwa talked about, Kimani Ishungwa. Where's this trap? Daniel. Where's this trap? And why was that trap mentioned in Kisumu specifically? And that message was not meant for anybody else. It was meant directly. It was allegedly meant for Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, who said he'll put traps in the corridors of, State House and everywhere else. But here we are. Why was this trap mentioned?
I mean, just to, that's what I said on my remarks. I was telling you about, analyzing what kind of, political statements were made on President's tour in Luo Nyanza region. And that's why I said it's quite interesting to observe that within the same convoy, where the senior most probably speaker was the Deputy President was there was also a critic to counter, this kind of unexpected pronouncement. I think that was really meant to shuttle and to put the Deputy President in check. Just mentioning, that we need to remind you that there are some statements you made that we have not forgotten. And the only person to tell you is the person from your region. Because then another member of parliament from Luo Nyanza would have woken up in that delegation and reminded him, sir, you mentioned these particular issues about shareholding and about, laying down traps for Raila. But here you are on his, Wakili is talking about a political base, speaking confidently. So there was the issue of, reminding him that we've not forgotten what you said, and this should only come from someone from your own region, who is just not only a member of parliament. The significance of a person mentioning this is the leader of majority, in the National Assembly, and who is in charge of some budget policy issues in the committee. So he's someone who is so dear to the President of the Republic of Kenya. So it was not just a statement that was just randomly mentioned. It is quite a statement that was mentioned strategically. Symbolically, it would mean then the Deputy President would have to be reminded, but also to go back, because that was a little bit, politically, hiking him, to go back and organize his region.
Is he comfortable?
Not really. I don't think any statement could make him comfortable. Because that is just when people are calling for unity, just when the president is asking for a broad-based government, just when the president is mentioning that he needs a support, from the leader of ODM, who is a former premier, and that they had worked together before. Then someone wakes up and say, we are reminding you that this same person the president is talking about working with is the same person you said you didn't want closely to him some times ago, just maybe a few months ago.
Yes.
So I think, Victor, that should show you that as much as it is of course a political statement that was made on the persona of the Deputy President.
Okay.
But of that was to make sure that exactly we know what we are going to do after this tour. Because that is what was, Kimani Ichung'wah was actually mentioning, that we all know that after this tour, you're going back to Mount Kenya. And definitely that you are going to mention about this tour.
Tutapatana huko.
Yeah, tutapatana huko. So I think it was just something that was abrasively mentioned in preparation to know that the next move, we know you, that the next move you're going to Central Kenya.
Allow me
this
to
is what
ask
you're going to say.
Wakili, how does the scale of justice work? Explain to me. There's that scale. How? What's the purpose of that scale of justice?
Usually what happens is this. When you go for a rally, and I've participated in...
No. The scale of justice, from your point of view. Yes. How does it work?
It tilts in favor of justice, definitely.
Okay.
Now, justice is very relational and relative. What is just to you may not be just to me.
Great.
So the scale of justice ought to tilt to the favor of the interest of the time. So scales are meant to weigh and outweigh.
Okay.
So they weigh in your favor on account of the interest you have, but I need them to outweigh. I need to outweigh you, and therefore the interest to treat it in my favor.
Very, very good. So put the political situation we are in on that scale of justice. And now what happened in Kisumu and what we are seeing in the mountain, okay? How do you, what outweighs the other in favor of the other person?
It's very interesting. Like it depends on where you put the scale. If you put it in Nyanza, it will weigh differently. If you put it in Nairobi, it's probably going to balance. If you put it in Mount Kenya, it's going to weigh differently and tilt differently. Now, here is how political meetings are convened. There's the convener and the forum. Nyanza is the forum, and the convener is probably the president and the government.
Yes.
Very well. So it's laced with development, undertones, and so on and so forth. But it's politics. Now, when you go to that meeting, you plan for it and say, the following people are going to speak. Ichungwa, Rigathi Gachagua, president will speak last. Where you place the speeches shall be as follows. Ichungwa, you will talk about this because we expect so-and-so to speak this way. And therefore, you keep on balancing. In fact, how you enter into those meetings is also symbolic. For instance, you can enter after your political rival. You see how your political rival has been received, and you prepare people to receive you even more, with more decibels. So how you speak at a political forum is exactly planned, and the words are planned. By the way, you need to know, if possible, how your political rival is going to speak in order to speak into him or against that for purposes of one, undoing the speech if he's going to come after you. But the advantage you have is if you speak last. That's why the president and the person of the day, the guest of the day, the chief guest, always speaks last. So if you see, for instance, political rivals, there is always the friction of who speaks last, because whoever speaks last has the last laugh. Now, in that meeting, what was planned is it was expected that there will be undertones from the deputy president in terms of how he's going to speak. Somebody had to be appointed, selected, to speak as against that or unto him. And therefore, and number two is, even in that political forum, you're supposed to score some political points of sorts. Because you will need the ground that you set then for the future, especially at 2027. Now, when you do that, somebody has to bring you down as try to bring you up. So the competition and the friction, as you put it properly in the example of the scales, they need to be tilted all the time. So that if you think he's gaining, you need to bring him down. And if you think he's down, you need to bring him further down. But you, as the individual in competition, your protagonist has to go down as you try to come up. So in those political speeches, the reading should be who is he attacking, and what is the messaging is he trying to put across, and what is the interest that is being served at the time in terms of dominance and the future.
Is Mount Kenya comfortable?
Mount Kenya is not comfortable, but I'll tell you this. The beauty about Mount Kenya is that everybody is angling for it because of the numbers that they have. And therefore, Rigathi Gachagua would want to consolidate Mount Kenya and be speaking unto them every time as their defender. Remember, in politics, you come to the table with numbers. That's really what it is. So when you say, I want 9 principal secretaries, 3 cabinet secretaries, and so on and so, it's not on account of, well, maybe money would work for some time.
Who are you?
But the point is, what are you bringing on the table? And I've seen it. Let me give an example. Joho was given a cabinet position because the politics of the coast were predominantly ODM. The dominance there. So he was put in that position for purpose of fixing that which has always been escaping the president every time there's an election there. So that then he can appeal into the numbers through Joho on account of the ODM influence around there. So it was supposed to fix that. If he fails to fix it, then he has no meaning in terms of bringing numbers to the table. So every time when you get into a political space, you must come with your numbers. The most important thing in politics is what is your influence for purposes of then getting dominance and space.
And that is why they're speaking.
If you don't matter,
that's why
you don't matter.
Yes.
But it's also the politics is always contextual and local. And adding into what Wakili is talking about, the fact that other political heavyweights and, for example, the former Prime Minister probably could have stayed and still stays politically relevant, is by the fact that he's been able to contextualize the political, base that he has and muscle them, that anyone can account that he still stay intact in them. And so this is probably what Rigji is struggling with to understand, for first and foremost, by the fact that he's not been able, for the first time, he stands a test of a political might by, coming out to make sure that he has got an intact base for him in central Kenya. Coming into position of the fact that he's riding on the UDA wave that was with the deputy president by that time, the Ruto's 2022 campaign. You remember the wave?
Is it still intact?
That's what I'm saying.
In the mountain.
Coming into 2022,
yes,
he was riding on that.
Yes.
Now it's a test of time by the fact that the president is in the national unity, trying to divide resources from getting different political players together. Then the question would be, can Rigji muscle the numbers in central Kenya and claim that these are the numbers I have? Whether I am talking to Kalonzo Musyoka or whether I'm talking to whoever, can this be attributed with the numbers that I have?
Which numbers count here? The voters, just a minute, the voters or the positions given in the last...
I am talking about the voters because what Wakili have said is a game of numbers.
Yeah.
And that is the undoing of our democracy. That you see, it's a majority that decides on behalf of the minority on how that, who gets into government, who gets into power. And this is why you had the likes of political scientists like Mutai Ngunye saying that, of course, the tyranny of numbers is what we see happening in each and every election. The more you muzzle it, the better you are. And that is why the person of the president and the president of the Republic of Kenya has decided by the majority of the voters and in the National Assembly, the ruling coalition is decided by the number of members of parliament they have. So this is what we are seeing, because we've not changed it by that time. Our representative democracy demands that we have many people behind you, and then you are able to have a political bargain with the numbers that we are having. So what I'm saying is, we have problems in Mount Kenya. Of course, the challenges that we have. Martha Karua is still angling, to have a voice in central Kenya. Jeremiah Kioni, who is speaking on behalf of the former president's party, is still making a position whether they are still in Azimio or not. Here is Kalonzo Musyoka, who Kenyans love most for what he's known for. He is now talking about making sure that the Akamba are still admitted into the game. You understand? To claim that here we are still speaking to central Kenya and Mount Kenya, trying to appeal to the electorate of Mount Kenya. So we have this issue around Mount Kenya, we have this issue of having central Kenya as a compact regional bloc that appears to be so fragmented.
Can somebody say that Mount Kenya is going to be neglected in 2027 election? The question I want to ask, gentlemen, there's something you said, Wakili. Raila Odinga, who's just resigned, assuming that he's won the election, the IAUC position, and he's run that race for a couple of, maybe 1 or 2 years, then resigns. So what happens if he loses, or if he resigns and comes back on the Kenyan politics? What will happen, number one, on the political scale, Mount Kenya and the two Nilotic communities, where the president comes from?
I think what will be the thinking immediately will be Raila Odinga genuinely will go for that position, is going for that position, because already he's started fronting on it, and he's all over on it. So we hope he gets it. He's a son of this country, and we rally behind him and let him get it. Now when he gets it, it's how he uses it. Raila Odinga can wake up on a day before election, even a year before elections, and say, I have served enough, but my people need me more, and I'm going back. And he comes back. When he comes back, he'll definitely pick from where he left, or pick it further from where he left, on account of the fact that he is not going to leave his clientele base and political base unattended. So as he attends to the African Union, he will be watching what is happening in Kenya. What he will be hoping is that he has a fallback to continue from and proceed from where he left. That will be a fallback. In any event, anybody who takes, if you take a job elsewhere and the job is contractual, you would want to know when you come back home what happens to you. And therefore, you will be looking at the fallback element. So it is not, therefore, completely impossible that Raila Odinga has a fallback to this. One, if he loses, and number two, what happens if he completes the term or doesn't complete the term. Now, there are circumstances as would allow Raila Odinga to complete the term, and some circumstances may come into being that may necessitate that he doesn't complete the term. Because some he has control, and some he may not even have control. So if he leaves the term midway, assuming he gets it, he still has a fallback, and the fallback definitely will be to his political base, and he'll pick it from where he is. Does Raila Odinga still want to be president of this country? That's the question probably should be asking.
Nobody knows.
Now that he is leaving, symbolically leaving the scene, the political scene, to a higher position would be, and of course all you need to say is to be president of Africa. Is he still angling to be president of Kenya? Certainly, he still has an emotional attachment to the Kenyan presidency.
Okay.
Now, has that emotional attachment to the Kenyan presidency somehow extinguished, somehow determined on account of the fact that he's going for a higher position? I think this position remains an interim option for Raila Odinga, an interim option. The permanent option for him, if it would be available, would the President of the Republic of Kenya. So he is not forsaking the presidency of the Republic of Kenya as we speak.
Okay.
He is going for an option as has been available, as opposed to the permanent option he has always wanted to have.
Director has been so good to us. He's added 2-3 more minutes. Now, the question is, as we finalize this, so is this like, okay, I almost said something, an internship, or a point to prove a point, that if he wins, he becomes the president of Africa. And then come towards 2027 election, he resigns and say, you know what, guys? I went to Africa, they picked me, so I can come back home. Can you pick me? Is this a message indirectly?
I think we are overemphasized by the fact that he's not been very explicit on some of his pronouncement. One,
just trying to read his mind.
That's correct. Why we say that he is not completely resigned as a party leader of the Orange Democratic Movement.
There's a reason somewhere.
There's a reason somewhere. By the fact that he's, and Wakilia has said that he's taking a break from politics, he's not resigned of it. Now, looking at what is expected of Honorable Raila Odinga in his AU, responsibilities, I think it is a matter of preference, taste, and time. Look, Raila has not, this is not the first time he served as in a position for AU. We should also learn from history.
Yes.
He's been a higher representative of infrastructure. That position he served. He abandoned that position and came back to Kenyan politics. Probably that was not what he wanted. That was not his preferences by that time. So there was no way. And when he was put into a tight corner with the Kenyan, president by that time, remember the Kenyan government, was even questioning the AU whether Raila should continue to be in the position because he was active in the Kenyan politics. He sacrificed that AU position for the Kenyan political affairs.
Yes.
And he resigned and gave his resignation letter to the current AU chair, Musa Mohammed.
Okay.
So this is what we can read, that where will be his preference come around 2026, 2027?
It's hard to tell.
Looking from history of what Honorable Raila has been up to. So I think he wants, and I agree with him, probably would be, I would not call it an interim, but I think he also wants to test and see what would be his profile as AU vis-a-vis what his country needs him to do.
There is a German word which goes mitkarumo. Keith, you didn't hear that, or you didn't understand that. Mitkarumo. Daniel understood it. It becomes sweeter when you're almost finishing. Allow me to stop it at that point. We're crossing over to radio. Gentlemen, it's always a good time whenever I have you on the show. I wish we had more time, but we've done 1 hour already. Just like that.
It's a pleasure.
I want us to take a break, and when you come back next time, Daniel, you had some function sometimes. How was it?
Yeah.
Did you get my mabati?
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, we are closing, right? I think it's important always to mention, and I mentioned it on set, that persistent fires in Nairobi should be a matter that it should be treated,